Yeah, rose bush is all done, and
Are we ready? Are we being recorded? Are we being recorded yet?
Recording in progress.
Okay, good evening, everybody. This is the second Mansfield Town Council meeting of the evening. This is our regular meeting of April 25th, 2022. And I'm calling the council to order. Ms. Chain, would you please call the roll?
Mossberger.
Here.
Berthelot. Here. Bruder.
Here.
Coleman.
Here.
Bertoni.
Here.
Patchenberger. Moran.
Here.
Sharon.
Here.
Shaken. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the public who wishes to address the council? Seeing and hearing nobody, I would call the opportunity for the public to address the council closed. And we move on to the report of the town manager, which we have in front of us in hard copy, but which is available on the website. So, Mr. Aylesworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This last Friday, and we received word of this very late in the week last week, but we received word from the mayor's office and his staff that, the governor's office and his staff, that Governor Lamont was interested in paying a visit to Town Hall to, in large part, talk with us about the recent DECD grant, the Connecticut Communities Challenge Grant, the $4.85 million grant that we received for both the South Eagleville or the Eagleville Green Project, as well as South Eagleville Road transportation and pedestrian safety improvement projects. And so we had a visit with the governor and a number of other dignitaries Friday afternoon. It was a good discussion. It was covered by the Chronicle, who sent a reporter to attend, and governor was very enthusiastic about what we're trying to do. I thought he received very compelling feedback from those in attendance, and I'm sure he'll be interested in coming back as that project moves forward, when there's groundbreaking and future ribbon cuttings and that sort of thing. So very much appreciate the funding support, but also the governor's ongoing personal active interest in what we have going on in town. And certainly, you know, as we've talked about before, we also appreciate UConn's support for the project and letters of support that they submitted that helped advance our grant application, presumably during the review period. Earlier today, myself, our finance director, and town's municipal financial advisor, as well as some other staff, we took part in a meeting with representatives from Standard & Poor's regarding our credit rating in connection to the proposed bond issue for the new elementary school construction project and the middle school roof replacement project. It was a good meeting, lots of questions being posed. At this time, we are anticipating that our current bond rating, which is a AA bond rating with Standard & Poor's, will remain the same. But a lot of robust discussion, and very much appreciate Bill Lindsay, our municipal financial advisor, for helping to pull that together and helping us with the presentation. I know I told the council previously that I was invited in my capacity as town manager to sit on the search committee, the advisory committee for the search for the next UConn president. There's quite a few of us on that body. I think, depending on whether or not we had full attendance at the kickoff meeting, I think I counted 36 faces in the Zoom meeting, Hollywood Squares, so it's kind of a search congress as much as it's a search committee. But got to hear from the executive headhunting firm about the process and you know, how the search committee will be used and all the community engagement around this. And so it was a good initial orientation. And as I said in my remarks in the packet, this week in particular, I think there's going to be more in the future, but this week there's kind of a flurry of stakeholder meetings, listening sessions. Those that work on campus, I'm sure there seems to be a lot of opportunity for input from the UConn sort of faculty and staff and internal audiences, but there's also, I want to make sure the council is aware, and anybody listening at home who's interested, this Thursday, the 28th, I believe at 3 o'clock, these are 45-minute sessions. There's a session specifically set up for community input, the community at large. So I would encourage residents that are interested in having their voice be heard about qualities and characteristics, attributes of, excuse me, of the next UConn president to take part in that opportunity. Mr. Shaken might actually be in a better position to brief the council on this, but based on the official formal communication we got from Commissioner Russell Tucker with the Department of Education, my understanding is that the reapportionment committee process for the Region 19 Board of Education, that basically those activities are being suspended because the reapportionment plan or the revised plan of representation that was put in place in 2012 would actually be adequate to put us in compliance with the federal constitutional standards based on our current population data. So it's just a matter of the Region 19 Board of Education actually taking the steps to formally adopt and implement this previously approved plan of representation. So did I capture that accurately, Mr. Shaken? More or less? Okay. As has been discussed, I think at length in a variety of committee meetings, and certainly, social media and the general public is aware now, as far as the construction of the new elementary school, Mansfield Elementary School, we did learn, I think it was maybe a couple weeks ago now, we're coming up on a couple weeks ago now, that we are officially off the critical path for completion for early September and to have the building open and ready for use the first week of school. School building committee is aware, the Board of Education is aware, and Superintendent Lyman and I put out a joint communication basically the morning following the school building committee meeting and the Board of Ed meeting, letting people know, what the process was going to look like from here, and basically what Plan B, as Kelly calls it, what that's going to look like. It's certainly not where we want to be. Some of these factors are, somewhat beyond our control, but certainly it's our goal collectively to have a school open for operation as soon as possible, while making sure that we don't cut any corners. That the quality, this is a state-of-the-art school, net zero building. It's a long-term investment, and we want to make sure that we continue to have that long-range view and get exactly what we're investing in. But that said, it clearly has impacts on the community. Families with school-age kids in particular are going to be impacted by this, may have concerns, but a plan is in place, and construction continues. So we'll hope that things proceed as well as they can from this point forward, and in the near future, we'll be working to put out a revised open date for reasons that I think will be self-evident. Nobody wants to put out a revised date and then have that date slip again. So we're going to move the date once. We're going to come up with a date that we're comfortable with, that we're certain that the school will be completed and open for students at that time. And we're just trying to figure out, what that best time frame is based on the current and available information. I think the last thing I wanted to note, our COVID-19, positivity rates, our case counts still are low. We still are in the low risk. That's that sort of best category, if you will, based on the new CDC guidance. But obviously, I'm sure everybody's noticing that the counts are trending upward again. And so it just behooves all of us to continue to practice good personal hygiene, make sure that we're being cautious where we can be, and obviously if you're sick, stay away and don't run the risk of spreading anything. But it is unfortunate that those numbers are trending up, albeit on a somewhat gentle path. Nobody wants to see those numbers go up. And I think I will end my report there and take any questions the council may have.
Mr. Coleman.
Yeah, Ryan. I received my TMR at 3:21 p.m. this afternoon. That's just not acceptable. I had a personnel committee meeting at 5 o'clock. That's not timely enough for me. Can you do any better on that?
I will continue to do the best I can. I think you will note that I've been getting the reports issued a few hours in advance of that on the regular. Today, the circumstances were a bit unique in that staff was working very aggressively to try to have things ready for tonight's budget adoption in light of proposed changes that the council, the members of the council conveyed to staff from late last night. So time that would have been able to be dedicated to the town manager's report first thing this morning had to be focused on updates to the budget pursuant to what recommended revisions had been requested. So
They're rather late consistently, honestly. The school bonding, when do you think you'll have that secured?
We're working on a timeline. We're expecting to have an updated bond rating, I believe, by May 5th, so that this can kind of go out to market by May 9th. Is that correct? Yeah, so May 9th.
Okay, in the bonding process, when you bond the school out, are you signing off on the school in any way, or when does the town actually sign off on the school?
Sign off on the school in terms of
In terms of
certificate of
acceptance
occupancy, or?
Yes, certificate of occupancy.
Yeah,
and
those are
acceptance of-
entirely unrelated review processes. The people that are involved in making sure that the building is ready to occupy are not involved in the finances for the building.
Okay. The problems at the Southeast Elementary School in regards to it being pushed out later in the year. Is that from supply issues? I know there was an HVAC motor that's not coming in time. What really led to the problems over there?
I don't think it would be in the best interest of the town to go into a belabored discussion right now of what led to the problems. There have been some supply chain issues, but I think that there have been a number of variables that have come into play in terms of why the project is behind schedule, and I don't want to off the cuff, and in public forum, for that matter, get into that discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the town manager? Mr. Shaken?
I just want to make sure, your report says that we expect the representatives from Colliers and superintendent and the building committee chair at our May 9th meeting to sort of give an update. Is that the appropriate public forum to get some details about the delays and understanding of why they've happened?
We can certainly discuss that. The goal around that particular discussion was to hopefully, bring to some finality the concerns about the suitability of the site that questions and concerns have been raised. But, and I think I want to reserve the right to talk with the larger group and make sure that, I'm not committing to a course that the larger group isn't comfortable with, but I can certainly share that message and from where I sit, would be happy to help advocate for that if it makes sense.
Okay, from my perspective, this, with all respect to the building committee and to the Board of Education, this is going to be a town-owned building when the building committee no longer exists, and we ought to have an opportunity, as the building committee has had, and as I'm sure the Board of Ed has had, to discuss the details of the delay, and so that the public can understand why there has been a delay and get a sense of it, and understand what we know at this point, at least, about potential timeline for the opening of the building.
No, I understand where you're coming from. The group, it would be a somewhat larger group involved in that discussion than, I guess, the discussion that I was proposing. So it's just a matter of making sure that all the correct parties can be available.
Thanks, yeah. Again, from my perspective, I think Councilor Coleman's questions have been answered rather satisfactorily in our written material, and so if we're going to spend our time speaking to the building committee and our owner's representatives, I'd like the opportunity to discuss any concerns the council has or issues the council has with construction.
And I would just say that some aspects of that would probably be more appropriate for an executive session.
Then we should have one.
I would assume that given a delay, there is the potential for legal action, which is why there's some caution here.
When do you think we might have an executive session to discuss that?
Well, Mr. Aylesworth is suggesting that we'll have somebody from the building committee at our May 9th meeting, and depending on what happens between now and then, that might be a possibility.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions of the town manager? All right, I want to remind the council that we have a non-meeting meeting at the end of this one, so even after we adjourn, you can't go home yet.
Not non-noticed meeting, right?
I
I know what you meant, but.
It's not a meeting. According to law, what we're going to do, what we're going to discuss does not constitute a meeting. So we're not going to have a meeting, but you can't go home yet. So the next item on the agenda is reports and comments of council members. Mr. Usberger, do you have a report in council?
No, but as a suggestion, I would say that going forward, it should have this situation arise again, that you perhaps permit as a party. Perhaps maybe get capitulation.
But we have to apply for a liquor permit to the town manager in order
No,
to
I
do
don't go
that, so.
far. Doesn't have to.
All right, I guess we're all a little punchy. Next comes the consent agenda. There are reports,
I'd
I'm
like to-
sorry, I
I'd like to
asked for
make a-
reports and comments of council members, and Mr. Osberger didn't have any. I just want to comment that I got my second booster shot this afternoon from Eastern Highlands Health District, and it was on Mondays and Thursdays, and it's a very simple procedure. Anybody who's looking for their second booster, please feel free to use the town. It is, you can do it with a walk-in, and the service was quick, efficient, friendly, and it's a good thing to do. Mr. Shaken, followed by Mr. Bruder, I believe? No, Mr. Shaken.
Thanks. Just a very brief appendage to what Ryan said around the reapportionment commission or committee. We no longer exist. We have been disbanded by the State Department of Education, the State Board of Education. If you read the letter from the commissioner on page 229 of our packet, you can get an explanation for why. And that's the appendage. The explanation is just that when 10 years ago we did this, there was a plan that the towns all passed by referendum to change vote apportionment on the Region 19 board. For whatever reason, it was never implemented by the board. And so now 10 years later, it still holds force in law. And if it were implemented, and it hopefully will be now, it does not meet the threshold for being out of whack that would call for the creation of a reapportionment commission. And so that commission is therefore not authorized to exist by statute. So we are gone. We had 2 meetings. It was nice seeing some of our colleagues from Wellington and Ashford. Thank you to Jeanette Picard from the Mansfield Board of Education for her short-lived time as chair. And hopefully we will see you again in 10 years.
I had the privilege to attend the Farmers Forum with our mayor and our town manager, and I just wanted to say that the work that the group there is doing is really interesting, and it was great to have that kind of forum where we could get together and kind of hear what some of the local farmers are looking for, what new farmers are looking to try and do, and I just wanted to say my thanks for being able to attend that.
Anybody else? Oh, I'm sorry.
like to make a
Mr.
comment.
Coleman.
Oh, yeah, I just want to let everybody know I'm not completely satisfied with all the information that I got over on the Southeast School site concerning soils, water, and site conditions over there. I'll continue to do research.
Okay, thank you. So the next item on our agenda is our consent agenda. There are several meeting minutes. There's appointments to town committees, which is a single appointment. An appointment to the Zoning Board of Appeals, a single appointment, and an annual comprehensive financial report. Do I have a recommendation to adopt the consent agenda? Mr. Osberger? Mr. Coleman?
Yeah, I'd like to pull item D out of the consent agenda, annual comprehensive financial report for discussion.
All right, we'll pull it out. So what's remaining on the consent, we will add that as old business, 7A. So with that amendment to the consent agenda, somebody move it? It's Mr. Osberger moved it. Yes, do we have a second on the consent agenda? Mr. Bruder. All those in favor of the consent agenda, please raise your hand.
As amended?
As amended. All right, Mr. Coleman votes no. Mr. Fertoni, how did you vote on that?
No.
I vote yes, the consent agenda.
Yes, on the consent agenda. Mr. Fertoni?
Yes.
Okay, so the consent agenda is adopted with the exception of the financial report, which we have moved to old business. Mr. Coleman, what's your problem with the financial report?
I think the complete financial report actually should have been given at the start of the budget season. And the budget season should have started earlier as well. I mean, that's a very helpful tool for trying to go line by line, to figure out where the money's going and to decide on our budget.
All right, what in front of us is a recommendation that we adopt the annual comprehensive financial report. Now, this is a recommendation from the Finance Committee, so Mr. Katchenberger, would you move the motion?
Hang on 1 minute. I haven't had time to review that document and make an educated vote on this. That's all.
It's on our agenda. I am asking Mr. Katchenberger to move adoption since it came out of Finance. You're not on.
We talked about this to some extent at the last meeting as well. And the reports from the auditors, which are, and this is not simply true for Mansfield, but everywhere, and which are surrounded by caveats, but with the important conclusion, and I'll just read one of them, that in fact, while based on the information provided, based on the information provided, that in fact, the town had met the necessary accounting standards required under both state law as well as federal law, and there's the federal audit. If you look at 6D, this talks about 6D in our packet. This is a letter from our auditors who we've used in various iterations for years, and they find that the town had procedures were sufficient. I wanted to read the sections, and I had highlighted multiple ones that for some reason I can't find now. But yes, so, but in other words, and these audits are not actually, really don't, at least do not refer to the budget. The point of the audits are not to determine what is appropriate public policy or even, how the money is allocated. The point of the audits is actually very limited, though important, and that is that the various accounting standards that municipalities in Connecticut, as well as government entities under state and federal law that and private standards, that they've been met, at least to the degree that the auditor has been able to look. The responses we've received throughout were that in fact everything had been met, and that we got I think a clean, would be the term, a very clean audit report. It's not related to the budget, so review of these reports would not aid or in any way, I think, of any kind of the budget review. They're two very separate sets of documents. So I'll move.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, no, when you read the statements, they're not user-friendly. Okay, so I have it on page 21. Yeah. All right. So this is on page 21 of the packet, and this is the annual comprehensive financial report for the year ending June 30th, 2021. So I move effective April 25th, 2022, to accept the comprehensive annual financial report and the state and federal single audit reports for the year ending June 30th, 2021, as endorsed by the Finance Committee.
All right, it's a committee recommendation, doesn't require a second. Mr. Katchenberger, do you wish to speak to your motion?
No, I mean, I've just simply with the comments I made before, that this is particularly in the difficult circumstances with federal and state grants, new software, and only very recently coming up to speed, having sufficient staff, or at least staff, certain key positions filled, that this is a real, I think, statement of quality that we can be proud of for the town.
Mr. Shaken?
Thank you, Mayor. Only just to point out, I agree with Councilor Katchenberger. This is a very good audit, a very comprehensive report, and a clean finding from our auditors. I just want to make the council aware that the Finance Committee did receive these documents and review them with our auditors at our April 11th meeting. Remind the council that all members of the council are welcome at all of our standing committee meetings, and say that in particular with this document, in part because it was so comprehensive and detailed, the agendas reflected an appropriate amount of time for councilors to spend to review the document in between finance and today. We spent 2 weeks rather than putting it on our agenda 2 weeks ago, immediately following the council meeting. And so just again, a reminder that if you're interested in getting into sort of this level of minute financial detail and asking lots of questions of experts, that the Finance Committee meets before our first meeting of every month, and all councilors are welcome to attend.
Anybody else? Mr. Osberger?
Well, I mean, I guess I appreciate all the comments and everything that have been said. I imagine that Mr. Coleman's initial concerns were the fact that, of course, this was 160 pages on just the initial report, and some of the other ones are as lengthy and such, and it would have been nice to review them prior to just, dropping it on back. It's wonderful that we got a great review and everything. However, still, I would have liked to have the time to at least.
I believe that's what the committee process is all about.
I think they were available, and I don't mean this critical of anyone, but they were available at the last meeting. They were included within the documents.
They were included in the agendas for the committee meetings as well.
Yes, and the documents themselves.
Right.
I can read,
All right. Are we ready to vote on this motion? Ms. Chang, you want to call the vote?
Asperger.
Yes.
Berthelot.
Yes.
Fruder.
Yes.
Coleman.
Abstain.
Bertoni.
Yes, excuse me, yes.
Katchenberger. Moran.
Yes.
Shuren.
Yes.
Shaken.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The motion has been adopted. All right, the next item on our agenda is under new business, and it is the acceptance of state funding for rehabilitation and repairs of town-owned historic building. You may remember that we had a visit from our state representative, our state senator, and also our other state state representative Brian Coleman at the Brian Smith, at the Historic Society buildings on 195 where Mr. Haddad announced the award of $845,000 for the maintenance and repair and preservation of these two historic buildings. However, what we need to do now is to accept this money. This is a grant which we would have had a hard time finding the money for. But if we had lost these buildings, it would have been a real loss to the town of our own history. So I really would like to thank Representative Haddad and Senator Flexer for having gotten us this money. This is a real achievement and something that we should be very grateful for. Mr. Aylesworth, you want to take over from there?
Sure, you did a great job introducing the topic. The only thing I perhaps would add is that there is a $50,000 match requirement from the town, and I think $4,000 and change that would come from the Mansfield Historical Society, but we don't need to appropriate new money because the money was already set aside in the capital, as a capital project in a prior fiscal year, I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So no additional financial commitment needed as match for this $834,000 project, or $834,000 grant for a total project budget of $888,000. One thing though, just for when the time comes and a motion is in order, do not read the motion that I prepared under the recommendation. I realized after we published, this is a weekend discovery, after we published the agenda, that actually in this case, because there's the certified resolution, it's the language, so 2 pages later, below the word seal, where it starts with whereas and continues on to the next page. Please read that in its entirety. with all the blanks filled in as included in the packet and not the motion that was prepared by staff. $2.15 in the packet, sorry.
All right, would somebody like to make this motion?
Sure.
Mr. Osberger.
Whereas pursuant to Section 4-66C of the Connecticut General Statutes, the Connecticut Department of Economic Development and Community Development is authorized to extend financial assistance for economic development projects, and whereas it is desirable and in the public interest that the town of Mansfield make an application to the state for $834,000 in order to undertake the restoration of Mansfield's 1842 Old Town Hall and 1935 Town Office Building. Now therefore be it resolved and to execute the assistance agreement. The Town Council that is cognizant of the conditions and prerequisites for the state financial assistance imposed by Section 40-66C of the Connecticut General Statutes, that the filing of the application for state financial assistance by the town of Mansfield in an amount not to exceed $834,000 is hereby approved, and that Ryan Aylesworth, Town Manager, is directed to execute and file such an application with the Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development to provide such additional information, to execute such other documents as may be required, to execute an assistance agreement with the state of Connecticut or the state financial assistance if such an agreement is offered, to execute any amendments, decisions, and revisions thereto, and to act as authorized representative of the town of Mansfield.
Is there a second? Mr. Bruder seconds. Would you like to speak to your motion, Mr. Osberger?
I think this is a wonderful grant. I think it was long overdue. We can thank our state representatives for getting this done for us, and let's get it underway.
Anybody else wish to speak to this motion? All those in, Mr. Coleman?
Has the bid process, cost estimation, completed on this?
So the dollar amounts, the project budgets are based on dating back to a condition assessment that was initiated in 2015. So in your packet, let's see, so it would be page 213 and page 214. There's a table for each building. I apologize that the font size is a little tough to read. You might need to pull out a magnifying glass. But these are essentially the priority projects, the scope of work, if you will, for each building to address the needs of each building. And so on the right side of each of these tables, there are budgets associated with them starting in 2016 and basically updated on an annual basis through 2019. And so the funding that has been awarded to the town reflects additional inflation on top of the 2019 estimates to provide some breathing room to pursue the scope of work. Now, it's possible that the $888,000 total budget, it may not be sufficient once this project is bid out to do everything that's listed here. These are estimates of probable cost based on subject matter experts. And so should the bid amounts come in north of the grant amount or the total project budget, including the grant, we may need to revisit the scope of work. But we have not bid anything out yet. We have not pursued a competitive process, and we would, of course, never do that until the town council has actually accepted the funds. That would be a big no-no.
I'm an optimist. What happens if the projected costs are south of 888,000?
Well, I think, don't have all the grant documentation in front of me, but as is typically the case, and I'll say with a relatively high degree of certainty that this would probably be the case, that they will fund up to an amount that covers the full cost of the project, or sorry, $888,000 in this case, or whatever is the ceiling of the project. If it comes in under that, they're only going to give us the match that corresponds to the actual project budget.
Okay, thank you.
That's the way it's typically done. Again, I don't have all the documentation from me for this grant, but I would be surprised if it was anything different in this case.
Mr. Shaken.
Thanks. Eagle-eyed observers who've added the totals of the columns on pages 213 and 214 will note that total is $715,000, not $888,000. I don't have the percentage offhand, but I attended, Representative Haddad was nice enough to invite the mayor and I to the unveiling of these dollars ceremony, and he told the Historical Society at that event that he had built in a rather generous inflationary rate since this cost assessment was done, knowing, of course, that the cost of building has increased substantially since this needs assessment was done. So I don't have that percentage right off the top of my
I
head.
think it was 22%.
But, okay, thank you. So that Representative Haddad did build in a cost increase since this needs assessment was done. If it's 22%, it's rather significant. So I am hopeful as well as my colleague that this will be plenty of money to address the issues in the two
Right.
buildings.
And the other thing I should have mentioned, I don't know why I didn't think, but again, these are the priority projects. So rather than turn money back, I should have also mentioned just the right synapse didn't fire. I apologize. There might be additional items, work that we would want to do that aren't on these priority projects. So hypothetically, if there was, additional budgetary flexibility, we could also add some additional work.
There might also be things discovered when they go to
Well,
repair an
yeah,
old building.
there's a
that
lot of
has-
if-thens,
That
yep.
has a lot of water damage. One never knows what you're going to find when you peel off the clapboards. Mr. Osberger.
Yes, I think that's wonderful that Mr. Haddad did build in the contingency. I see the last column here says 2019. So, yeah.
All right, are we ready to vote on accepting this project? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And it is unanimous. Thank you very much. I know the Historic Society will be immensely grateful. All right, the next item is the advanced hiring of the Community Assistance Coordinator position. And this comes from Personnel, Mr. Shuren.
Yes, and I will ask the town manager simply to explain briefly the reason for putting this in at this point and the role of the position.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mr. Shuren. So the position and the role of the position, and of course, basically a quasi job description is laid out in the subject matter background. So I don't want to rehash that here. That's in your agenda item summary. I would only note that the position, the need for the position has been discussed on a few different occasions during budget workshops. The counselor correctly points out that we're here discussing this now because of somewhat unique or different circumstances, and that is if we were just looking to fill the position effective July 1, which is what it's funded for in the FY 22-23 budget, we wouldn't really be here because that funding was approved is part of your adopted budget from a few moments ago. But we are looking to do an advance hiring. This is a position that's not currently in this year's budget. We're adding a position to the org chart, if you will, prior to the conclusion of the fiscal year. And so that's why I went before personnel, and that's why it's going before council. And I believe Ms. Schneider's still here. She explained, I think, in a previous meeting why the advanced hiring of this position and the services that it provides would be helpful. She and Ms. Painter did. We're trying to get money out the door as quick as we can, in particular with the Helping Hands program. Those grant dollars have a shelf life of through the end of December, and so every additional month that we can be working with the public, helping families that need assistance, increases the odds that we'll be able to come closer to fully expending those grant dollars.
Any questions on this, Mr. Shaken?
Thanks. I think this should be a case of sort of need trumping process, but I want to be clear that this budget is not approved, even though the council has voted for it, and the voters could very well overturn this decision at town meeting in a few weeks. I will note that town meeting is 3 or 4 weeks before June 1st, and so I trust that if that happens, we will not hire for this position in advance if the position is then not funded on July 1st.
That's correct. I would not envision anybody getting into this role before May 11th.
Thank you.
Okay, are we ready to vote on this?
Let me make the motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Move effective April 25th, 2022, to endorse hiring a full-time community assistance coordinator in the Human Services Department starting on June 1st, 2022, 1 month in advance.
Thank you. It doesn't need a second. Any further comments or questions about this position, Mr. Coleman?
How come we're failing so badly at the Helping Hands program? We have to hire someone for $55,000 a year to give away money. Just doesn't make sense to me.
So our staff, our existing staff in planning and development, of which there are not very many, have very demanding jobs under their normal job responsibilities. This program, this grant-funded program, this is not something that is customary, it's not part of their customary duties. They're trying to go above and beyond to administer this program within existing staff capacity. We're recognizing that that's exceedingly challenging, hence the proposed, in part, the proposal to create this position now. So I'll stop there.
And to put it in human services as opposed to the planning department.
And this person will also be writing grants for the future, so recognizing prior success with bringing money in, and that this is something we should do. So this will be a person with that particular skill set.
Any further comments, questions? Are we ready to vote? All those in favor of creating this position, please raise your hand. Mr. Coleman, you're voting no? I'm sorry, you're muted?
Yeah, no.
Okay, motion is adopted with one no vote. All right, next comes the transfer of ARPA funds to a newly established ARPA Special Revenue Fund. Now, when I got into this government business, meant 20 years ago, the practice was to get rid of all these special funds and put all of these programs in the general fund. And we very slowly reversed that position and created one special fund after another. So, Mr. Aylesworth, tell us why we need to do this.
Well, so I mean, I guess I don't know necessarily the full arc of the public finance best practices. I do know that, I guess at least as long as I've been in school and in this profession, that the trend has kind of been the other way, to separate the dollars for distinctly separate purposes so that you don't confuse the matter. So in this particular case, the quick summary is, as the council's already been made aware, last summer, we received our first tranche of ARPA funds, so half of $7.5 million. And because we didn't have a special fund set up for that, those funds went into our capital non-recurring fund. We kind of just parked the funds there because, in large part, the ways we might use these funds are for those sorts of one-time, non-recurring special purposes. But now that we are, moving closer to actually, with recent council votes to authorize the expenditure of these funds, i.e., HVAC upgrades to the library and all the things that council's already acted on, we really do need to have the funds in the correct fund, a special revenue fund from which to expend. And so that's basically all this is. This is just a housekeeping, sort of request. The dollars will still be used for all the things that we've discussed and the council's voted on. It's just a matter of kind of keeping those dollars clean and neatly separate from everything else. So when it comes to reporting requirements that we have to satisfy for U.S. Treasury, we're better able to do that. We don't have to do journal, and entry adjustments and back things out of different operating budget lines or capital budget lines. So in a nutshell, that's what we're trying to do. And then the last thing I would say is, so again, we've received our first tranche, we've received half our ARPA funds. So the money we already received would then go into this special revenue fund, but there won't be a need when we receive our second tranche this summer, because we're expecting to receive the second tranche roughly 1 year from the first. The funding would just go into this new special revenue fund. There wouldn't be a need for additional council action at that point.
Thank you. The motion is on page 224. Mr. Bruder?
Thank you, Mayor. Pulling it up. I move, effective April 21st, 2022, to appropriate $3,771,446 for a transfer out of the CNR fund to the ARPA Special Revenue Fund for the projects approved by the town council on March 14th, March 28th, and April 11th, 2022.
Is there a second? Ms. Berthelot seconds. Do you wish to speak to your motion?
I think that our esteemed town manager covered it very nicely, and I would support that, and hence why I'm making the motion.
Anybody wish to speak to this motion? Mr. Coleman?
Once it goes into the fund, it's still earmarked money, right? How it's appropriated.
If you're asking if like the previous council votes on uses of the fund, if that carries with it to the new fund?
Okay,
Then
so
the
that
answer is
doesn't
yes.
change. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Are we ready to vote? All those in favor of the transfer of money to the new fund, please raise your hand. And we are unanimous. Thank you, one and all. All right, the next item on the agenda is reports of council committees. Personnel?
We met earlier this evening. In addition to the Community Assistance Coordinator position, we had discussions about 3 other items. One is a review of the charge and name change Personnel Committee to change it to Personnel and Procedures, which is a more accurate reflection of the scope of the committee's work. That will be coming before the council, the recommended charge, at a subsequent meeting. Second, a discussion of a body that exists in our policies that has not met for many years, Personnel Appeals Board, which we believe should be restaffed, reconstituted, and that we will be discussing with the Committee on Committees. Third, we began a discussion in the very early stage of the town manager performance evaluation, which we expect to and hope to conclude by October, begin in June. And we will be discussing with the full council our questionnaire and our other procedures regarding that.
Any questions for Mr. Shuren? Mr. Coleman?
I just want to get back on that language of the appeals board. Is that language is as old as the inception of the board? Maybe we ought to look at that language a little closer. If the language is 30 or 40 years old, maybe we ought to look at the laws.
There is state language that sets forth the requirements for the board. The town
Yeah,
language, the town
How old
language,
is that language?
I'm sorry.
How old is that language?
Well, whenever the state adopted it, it's still in force. The town language takes itself from that state language. There may be a possibility of reviewing that, and I would have no objection to setting that language before the council for its consideration. But as of now, we have the language that is adopted by the council and that is, even though of long standing, under which we would be operating.
Thank you, Mr. Sherman.
Any further questions on personnel? Okay, finance.
Finance has not met since the last council meeting.
Okay, Committee on Committees.
We did meet, and in the consent agenda were various appointments to committees. I'll note that the Affordable Housing Committee is now fully populated, yay. And so their work should begin soon. And one of the things we're doing is we're sort of systematically looking at charges and making sure that the charges match with what committees are doing and also the intent of the council. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, comments on boards and committees? The Departmental and Advisory Committee reports? Any comments on petitions, requests, and communications? Anything for future agendas?
I guess I'll follow up with earlier after budget season, but certainly we need a conversation about addressing concerns of the older people in our town, and we do have a aging Committee on
Commission on
Aging.
Aging.
Yeah, and certainly they should be part of that conversation sometime in the near future.
Thank you. The next item is a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Mr. Shaken, seconded by Mr. Osberger. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. We are adjourned. Take a few minutes to close everything out. Please remember the town meeting on May 10th at the Mansfield Middle School to take a look at this budget, which we have just adopted. There's a public information session between now and then. On what date?
Peter should know, he's presenting, right? I know, I'm just testing him.
It's
May-
May 5th. So there is an opportunity that you can do either virtually or in person. We will be doing it at Town Hall on May 5th. There will be a full presentation of the budget that we have just adopted, which will be taken to the town meeting where we will explain it again, and you will all have a chance to vote on it.
And
Right.
I was just saying one other item. So now that the budget's been adopted tonight, staff will be working. We have the citizens guide to the budget prepared. We're holding off on sending it to the printer until we knew for sure we had an adopted budget from the council. So that will go out this week with the intent of having it hit people's mailboxes before the last public information session.
Okay. Thank you, one and all. Good night.
Hello, Ryan? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to have to assign you as the
Council Chambers
host for the
becomes the
meeting.
host?
Council Chamber, yes. And someone needs to get Mr. Coleman back on
Oh, we lost Brian.
because I think he left.
Recording stopped.
Okay,
Mr.
so I'll
Fertoni is
monitor
still
the
there.
waiting room.
Yeah, I
Okay,
asked Charlie to text him.
Okay, I'll just monitor the waiting
Okay.
room and let him in.
all right. So
Thank
I'm
you.
going to assign you as the host. Okay, and I will log off now.